Okay. So hello and welcome to the DEEPMED Seminar organized by the ERC group DEEPMED. Today we have with us Emiliano Ramieri, who is going to talk about challenges and opportunities for maritime spatial planning in the Mediterranean Sea. And Ayman Chigri will be presenting him. Please, Ayman.
Thank you, Lino. Thank you, Emiliano. So today we have with us Emiliano Ramieri. Is a goat of Marine Spatial Planning, which is a manager, research manager in the is the research manager in the Institute of Marine Science at the National Research Council. He has more than 20 years of experience with marine spatial planning and integrated coastal zone management initiatives within national context, within the Adriatic and the Mediterranean as well, and with a broader European level. He's since 2011 dealing with climate change adaptation policies within EU initiatives. He was involved in many projects, European projects, like SHAPE, Moody's, Supreme, and he was involved as one of the contributor in EU MSP platform. He has tens of publications about marine policy, and from science to policy, and from science to climate adaptation. He was or still consultant in UNEP PAPRAC, and he was involved in many books and reports about MSP and EAC, integrated coastal zone management, at European level and even worldwide background. Emiliano, the floor for you.
Thank you, Ayman. Thanks a lot for the invitation. As always, a big pleasure to have the opportunity to talk with other researchers on the topic, and has been for me also a way of putting some order in a number of things I would have liked to tell you. And it's always, great to set a bit and try to convey a message is also helpful for myself. So I'm sharing again the screen, and you should now see the presentation.
Yes, we do.
We see it.
Great. So what I'm talking about today and presenting, I will start with an introduction, why MSP is important for the sustainable management of the ocean. Quite obvious, but I think it is good to start with setting the frame. What's the evolution of maritime spatial planning in the Mediterranean? There has been quite a lot of activities in recent years. What are the main challenges the countries have to tackle when working on maritime spatial planning? And how does an MSP plan look like? And I will refer here to basically the Italian example. And then I would like to conclude with a few reflections on cross-border and transboundary dimensions of maritime spatial planning, which links very concretely and obviously to climate change and why climate smart MSP is essential in the Mediterranean. So why MSP is needed? Because basically the majority of the people perceive the sea as an empty space, like the left side of the left figure of the slide, with no activities, no one, and some kind of pristine environment. The reality is completely different. We know, the number of activities at sea are quite a lot, and they are increasing, creating conflicts, but also opportunity for synergy. And this is exactly where MSP comes into place. That's the result of the great attention the sea has been receiving in recent time in terms of economic development, socioeconomic development. You know, there is this issue of blue economy, which is really pushed forward by several policy frames all over the world. Is a concrete opportunity for the human well-being. I mean, using the better the sea space and the sea resources to increase our socioeconomic economics and our well-being. And there's been called also in a recent publication in a quite very famous publication, the blue acceleration. By the 2000, there has been a turning point in several activities at sea, which have clearly started increasing sharply. If you look at most of the indicators of the human activities, there has been a dramatic increase in the use of, for example, fishery resources, deep sea minerals, or space for aquaculture, space for shipping, and more recently, space for offshore wind farms. Fortunately, there's been also an increase in marine protected areas, but we can easily argue that this is not taking the pace of the increase in human activity. So this blue acceleration is a reality all over the world, and that's quite clearly demonstrated by cumulative impacts at sea, which are affecting all the areas, with a few of the oceans areas left partially unaffected by human activities. There is actually no area at sea where humans have not been creating implications. And there are areas, the red ones, where, I mean, these implications are higher. The Mediterranean is not the most affected for the moment area, but is still in the top ranking, in the top rank of the impacted areas in the world. And there where a maritime spatial planning comes into place, and specifically to try to contribute in implementing the Sustainable Development Goal number 14 to improve conservation and sustainable use of the oceans, sea and marine resources for the sustainable development of human activities. And to do this, we have to consider what is called ecosystem-based maritime spatial planning or marine spatial planning. So an approach to planning at sea where the ecosystem is central in all the activities which pertain to the planning of human activities. Which this is very much linked to all the other SDG goals. When you look at the sea, I mean, you have to look at most of the sustainable development goals, and an MSP can play a role. Normally, you hear that there are a lot of definitions of maritime spatial planning. This is true. I mean, if you go through the literature, there are quite several definitions of what maritime spatial planning is. Sorry, but nevertheless, they all share commonalities, and some of these commonalities are quite evident and strong. So I'm using one of the most quoted one, which is by Hiller and Duver in the step-by-step approach to MSP guideline published by UNESCO, and you see that MSP is a process, a public process for the allocation of spatial and temporal distribution of maritime activity or human activity at sea to achieve both ecological, economical, and social objectives. And here you can see that the ecological objective, the ecosystem dimension, is put at the same level in MSP than the other objectives pertaining to economy and society. And that's actually exactly one of the key components of ecosystem-based approach to MSP. The marine spatial planning has been expanding all over the world in the last 15 years. In this paper by Frazao Santos, and there is a clear mapping of areas covered by MSP in 2020. You can see that mostly 50% of the area under national sovereignty, including EEZ and territorial waters, were covered by an MSP process. And now this number has been even increased. So there is quite an increase of efforts in planning the sea. You can see the distribution 2014 2024, sorry, of the different countries having a plan approved or a plan under development in the different continents of the world. If we look at the EU, Europe, and then at this Mediterranean Sea, a major driver has been the European MSP Directive issued in 2014, and that has obliged countries European Union countries to deliver the MSP plans by 2021. Several of them succeeded, some of them didn't succeed. Italy, where the country I come from, was on late, but the end was one of the country delivering the plan. So now the situation in the Mediterranean is this one. In red color, you can see the plans which have been approved and are now available, and in green, these which are under development. So if we look at the 8 European Union countries, 6 of them have delivered plans and 2 are still working on the plans very quickly from left to right or west to east. Spain has developed 5 MSP plans for the area they call demarcations, and 2 of them are in the Mediterranean. The one on the Strait and Alborian Sea, and the other one on the eastern Spanish Sea and Balearic Island. Italy has delivered 3 plans for the Adriatic Sea, the Central Mediterranean and Ionian region, and the Western Mediterranean and Tyrrhenian region. France has 4 plans. One is in the Mediterranean, all delivered, and they are working on the second cycle of the MSP process. Malta has a plan, which was one of the first, and they are also working on the second version of the plan. And what's happening in the East, Cyprus issued a plan in 2023, while Slovenia also was one of the first in delivering their plan. What's happening in Croatia and in Greece? Croatia has 2 typology of plans. 7 plans for the territorial waters, which have been developed by the counties. So they are plans in place. You can see here in orange the area covered. And in green, you see that they are working on their plan covering the economic exclusive zone. They entered the consultation, the transboundary consultation as well, and they should deliver the plan quite soon. And finally, Greece is working on 4 plans, and starting on the Northern Aegean, that's the one more advanced, and they are quite on late, but they are progressing in this quite difficult job due to the dispute they have with neighboring countries in the limitation of the area and the national jurisdictions. The plans are quite different among each other. You probably have heard the slogan that a fits for all approach does not exist in maritime spatial planning. This is very true. I mean, there are plans which are countries which have a different number of plans. We have seen Spain has 5, Italy has 3, Slovenia has only 1. And of course, the dimensions of the plans are very different. I mean, the Slovenian plan compared to the Italian plan can overlap with the specific plan unit of a small Italian region. So the approaches must be different, and that's quite obvious. If we look at the non-EU countries, there are some initial initiatives going on. I have mapped 3 of them. One in Turkey, where they are start working on their MSP plan, and they are doing this by constructing their MSP geo-platform, which is available online. There was an interesting project in Montenegro, supported by UNEMAP PAPRAC, the regional activity center dealing with ICZM in the Mediterranean from the UNEMAP constellation. And they developed a concept proposal for a Montenegro MSP plan. And there is a plan issued by Israel in 2019. PAPRAC is also working with Albania to produce a similar consent proposal for MSP plan for the Albania. Both Montenegro and Albania are pre-accessing countries to the EU, so they're working consistently on this, another aspect of the European directives. And there are then several strong ICZM experiences which have been developed by other countries, or even including those on the southern rim of the Mediterranean, which are now extending to an MSP. So that's to say things are evolving quite quickly, and probably we will have more and more MSP plans also in other non-European Union countries. And that's even why, and that's even because UNEP-MAP has issued this conceptual framework for MSP in the Mediterranean that introduce the concept of MSP in the framework of the Barcelona Convention and provide some common definitions and methodology and criteria for implementation of MSP, also in countries which are not part of the EU and cannot, therefore are not called to implement the European directive, but they have to implement the ICZM protocol and therefore the MSP, which has been introduced, linked to the protocol by this conceptual framework. What are the major challenges all countries are dealing with in the Mediterranean? Well, one of the most obvious one is overfishing. Although pressure has been decreasing because of the great job GFCM is doing in managing the sea and through a number of fishery plans, I mean, this remains very high for several stocks, and that's still an issue of common management. MSP has to look at very consistently, not only in terms of managing according to the different fishery policies, the quotas and the stocks, but even in providing space for what are called the fishery restricted areas, so areas where some typology of fisheries, typically trawling, are banned and are used for restocking. One of the most famous example is the Pomo or Jabuka pit in the Central Adriatic, which has been closed in agreement between Slovenia and Italy and Croatia, and is producing quite remarkable results in terms of fishery recovery. Another major human activities occurring in the Med is definitely shipping. You know that 1/4 of the worldwide trade, shipping trade, pass through the Mediterranean because of the connection from the Suez Canal to the Gibraltar Strait, enabling to navigate in the Mediterranean, and that's of course creating a lot of pressure along major routes of navigation. There is not only the worldwide shipping, I mean, there are also short-term commercial activities going on between the north and the south and the east and the west, which are making the situation quite complex in terms of density of routes in the Mediterranean. Tourism is definitely another big pressure in the Mediterranean. Is a worldwide known Mediterranean tourism destination, affecting several of the coastlines. And the situation is quite under pressure in many areas of the North Mediterranean, but now spreading even southern quite consistently. And in terms of evolution, we should not forget the expansion of offshore wind farming, or offshore renewables, which basically means offshore wind farming. They are not operational wind farms at the moment in the Mediterranean, apart a very small one in the southern Italy, and a field which is going to be in operation in the Gulf of Lion in front of France, more definitely wider. But there are a lot of projected activities which are going to add other pressures and other use of the sea to the traditional uses already present at sea. Again, this is to say that we're having quite intense cumulative impacts all over the Mediterranean and, of course, along the coastline where most of the activities are concentrated. And last not least, we need to target or we need to match the biodiversity conservation targets set by the international and the EU biodiversity strategy, which calls the countries to cover at least 30% of sea with marine protected area. And in case of your countries, 10% of this area should be strictly protected. The situation is far from these targets, because only a few more than 8% of the areas of the sea is actually covered by marine protected areas, including in this concept all typologies of protection. And when we look at strict protection, this is very, very, very small. And dramatic is also the situation of concrete management of this protected area. Only a few of them have concrete measures in place to improve conservation. So there is a lot of work to do even in this perspective. And on top of all, you clearly know that the Mediterranean is an hotspot of climate change impacts because of its position between the continental and sub-Saharan climatic regions, and that makes very much this basin vulnerable to climate change. Again, something MSP has to deal with. This has also implication in terms of land-sea interactions, which is another key component of any MSP plans. I mean, the same European Union directive calls the member states, when they do develop the plans and apply the plans, to take land-sea interactions to considerations. These land-sea interactions are normally defined as interconnections, like flows and process which relate to natural conditions and human uses acting across the interface between the land and sea. Those are very important in the Mediterranean because a lot of activities are actually occurring along the coastline or on the coastal waters, making the interaction quite strong in this sea basin. And even because of climate change, I mean, the implication of land-sea interactions are quite important in terms of, for example, of coastal erosion and flooding. And again, it's something which comes into place as a challenge for any MSP planner. Even also important for the Mediterranean, and I would say quite characterizing this area, is the issue or the concept of landscape and seascape. I mean, you know that the Mediterranean is very famous for its environment, which also include the seascape and landscape concept. And again, that's something which MSP plan shall try to take into consideration. And it's quite difficult because it's quite a land-based concept for the moment, and there are some attempts to do this and to take into consideration, and it is something to consider in both directions. I mean, from sea to land, because any activity at sea have to consider what's the landscape they can have, they can see on the coastline, and there are very different situations. I mean, you can have in the Mediterranean some quite pristine environment, but also a coastline, also highly anthropized coastline, or coastline where the traditional activities are shaping the landscape in a consistent way. How to consider them in MSP plan is very challenging because they are very local, very at the very detailed level, and quite challenging and difficult to take consideration in plan which do span across 100,000 of kilometers. But there is also the other direction. I mean, from land to sea, as activity at sea do produce an impact in the seascape. That's typically the case of extraction of offshore oil and gas through or extraction rigs, like in the Adriatic or in the Strait of Sicily. That is going to be very also an important issue for the expected development of offshore aquaculture, with the construction of fishery cages at the Far Sea and the development of offshore wind farms. So something really to take in consideration, which is completely different from situation in the North Europe, where the landscape and the seascape are probably less important also for economic activities, considering that the tourism in the Mediterranean strongly rely on this idea of Mediterranean landscape. And finally, there's another component which is quite interesting and relevant for the Mediterranean, which is the one for the water. I mean the below water seascape, which includes both the natural environment, the habitats, but also the rich underwater cultural heritage of the Mediterranean Sea, formed by wrecks and by the several archaeological remains that can be found in the area, which can be also a value for some economic activity like scuba diving, for example. How did, for example, the Italian plan consider the landscape issue in their plan? We'll come back to the Italian plan and how it works. But for the moment, I would like to stress the fact that has been taken in consideration by mapping, zoning, a strip at sea along all the coastline where the cultural heritage and landscape values are particularly high, and giving priorities for landscape preservation at that part of the sea where these occur. So that's quite a unique case in MSP plans to take into consideration zoning of coastal cultural heritage site and landscape in terms of zoning at sea to preserve this coastal landscape in a proper way. But this will be clear with a few examples from the Italian case later on. Even if a size fit for all approach doesn't exist in MSP, we can say that an MSP plan typically includes some components which are present in several, if not all, of the plans. I mean, there is an understanding of the current state, including different maps on several human activities and environmental components. There is analysis of interactions between uses, often made by metrics of interactions. There is an analysis of impacts of uses to the environmental components, and then there is a zoning of activity at sea, what the plans foresee for the different activities, and also definition of regulation, how this activity should or should not be implemented. And last but not least, quite important, one of the key components is the monitoring plan of the MSP plans to understand whether the plan is implemented in a proper way and producing the expected results. In the case of Italy, we have applied this approach. I mean, these are the components you can find in the Italian case, and these are the different sectors which are included in the Italian MSP plans. Indeed, 3 of them are cross-cutting and transversal principles: sustainable development, environmental protection, and landscape and cultural heritage, which means are taken into consideration in any zoning of any activity at sea in a cross-cutting way. We refer to the Italian MSP plan as a multiscalar approach to MSP. What is a multiscalar approach to MSP? Is an approach where you apply different zoning and different regulation measures at different scales. Italy has 3 scales: the one of maritime areas, 3 maritime areas for 3 plans; the one from submarine areas. You see in the left figure that there are several submarine areas for each of the principal maritime areas, and the level of planning unit, which is the smaller scale of the MSP plan, where you define the specific zoning regulation. And again, I will be clearer with some example later on. This approach, in our view, is rather relevant and important because it enables MSP to take decision about planning and management of the marine space at the local condition and taking into consideration local needs and local objectives. So, as said before, Italy has 3 plans. Each plan is subdivided in submarine areas. In the case of the Adriatic, we have 9 submarine areas, and you can see here some of the criteria which have been used to define this area, which includes legal and administrative boundaries, the delimitation of geographic subareas set for fisheries management reasons, the definition of area open to hydrocarbon exploitation and prospection, other plans, other areas identified by other planning, of course, oceanographic characteristic, and the distribution of uses of the sea. And then these are subdivided into planning units. I'll jump to the others because it might be clear. So for the moment, you must know that each sub-area can include a different number of planning units, and the planning units can be of different size according to the local conditions and the local needs. For each planning unit, we do define in the Italian plan two things: the typology of the planning unit and the use vocation or vocation uses which are attached to each planning unit. There are four typologies of planning unit in the Italian plan. The generic ones, where all the uses which occur at sea are considered at the same level. There are not priority users or uses which are prioritized than others. In this case, therefore, all the activities at sea are considered equally priority. And the strategic development, the strategic approach taken by the Italian MSP plans, all uses are considered equal in this typology of planning unit. Then there are the prioritized planning unit, where one or more than one uses of the sea sectors, uses of the sea are considered more relevant than others, therefore priorities, and which means that they should be developed in a priority way, while other uses are still allowed if they do not conflict with the priority ones. And then we move to the other two typologies where the prioritization of uses is stricter. I mean, there are the limited planning units where there is a predominant use, and others are allowed only if they are really compatible with the predominant use. This is typically the case of a protected area. You can have, I mean, here the predominant use is protection, but in the protected area you can have other uses which are not conflicting with the predominant use, like, for example, small-scale fisheries or recreational activities. And finally, there is the reserved use, where this predominance of the use is even stricter. I mean, the areas are reserved only for a specific use, as the case, for example, of strictly protected area or areas dedicated to Navy for military operations. In this case, other uses are not permitted unless they are serving the reserve use, like transportation, for example, of operators into strictly protected areas. And the four typologies are used in the MSP Italian plans to categorize the different planning units. We can see here a couple of examples. This is the case of the submarine area in front of the Friuli Venezia Giulia region, the Italian regions happening in the north in the Adriatic Sea. You can see in the central figure that we have a planning unit in blue, which has been prioritized as a priority type planning unit because of maritime transportation. Here, the priority use is maritime transportation. That's a unit which overlap with the major routes of shipping going and coming from the port of Trieste and I would say even Koper in Slovenia. You see in the middle of this blue line, there is a figure which has a double color, green and blue. Here, the prioritization is both for shipping, as the other one, but also for nature protection, because that's overlapping with a Natura 2000 site protecting rocky outcrops on the bottom of the sea, which are quite important for the conservation of nursery for fisheries. So there are double use, which takes into consideration of two dimensions. I mean, the surface where prioritization is very much for shipping, and the sea bottom where prioritization is very much for environmental protection. Another case is that of a Puglia region in the southern Adriatic Sea, northern Ionian Sea. Here you have a greater number of planning units, and also the size is completely different. There are some large ones and some very small ones. Because of the different and the complex articulation of the economic ecological system in the Puglia region. Here you can notice the strip along all the region, which is also including the dark green color, which is related to landscape preservation, and that's what I was saying before. As the Apulia region has a lot of cultural heritage sites and the landscape protected area, we consider to include here this narrow strip along the wall, Apulia region, to prioritize the preservation of the cultural heritage sites and natural landscape, together with other activities, because of course, I mean, the coastal area of the Apulia region is also very important for tourism. So you can see that several part of this area is also including the orange color, which refers to the tourism as a priority. Okay, going beyond the national approach to the transboundary, cross-boundary level approach, we can distinguish two major level of application of what's needed for cooperation and collaboration. The cross-boundary one, where two countries do share a common border, and they shall try to plan this border in a coherent way. That's typically the case if we refer still to the Adriatic of Italy and Croatia, that they do share the delimitation midline of the continental shelf. Or, I mean, countries can also deal with transboundary MSP when different countries, more than two countries, share a common sea basin, and that's typically the case of the entire Mediterranean Sea or the Baltic Sea in other contexts. We do have to plan coherently to approach major common problems, as could be, for example, fishery management. Already the GSA areas defined by the GFCM, the fishery commissions, they do take in consideration areas pertaining to different countries in a transboundary approach, but this can be done for any of the sectors which extend beyond the maritime borders. So both are very much important. Both are stressed as important by the EU directive and by the operational application of the directive and other policy document into the plans. Examples of what we are doing and what the community is doing to make this transboundary approach and cross-border approach concrete. They include the availability of data through geo-platforms. One of the most important one is definitely EMONet. You know, EMONet publish several data of the, for example, including data on the use of the sea. But very importantly, they do also publish the plans. Hopefully, at the end, they will publish all the MSP plans through a common common protocols and common modalities of visualizing the different areas in a way you can easily compare the situation. You can see here on the left, for the Mediterranean, we have Spain and Italian MSP plans online, and you can immediately see, for example, at the border what's the situation. There is a big area for the Italian plan, western and Sardinia, which is planned for biodiversity conservation priority, which is bordering an unplanned area with Spain. Here, for example, we cannot highlight a major conflicts because there is an unplanned area and an area which is prioritized for conservation, which are not in major conflicts each other. The Baltic is, of course, already fully covered by all the MSP plans, but the situation will be soon improved also for the Mediterranean. Then there is the research, which is producing research tools to enable and support the cooperation and collaboration. I mean, as the Institute of Marine Sciences of the Research Council, we have been developing these tools for MSP platform, which is a geoportal providing data for the entire Mediterranean on several human activities, environmental components, socioeconomic aspects, and it's freely accessible, and you can use the data based on the I don't get the word, sorry. The access they are provided by the data owner. The tools for MSP also include some tools. One of the most used one is this cumulative effect assessment tools, which has been used here, for example, in the size EPSA, the area in the south of Ionian Sea, south of Adriatic Sea, northern Ionian Sea, to map the area mostly affected by cumulative pressure You can see here in the example, the very highly affected areas are along the Apulia region, in more close to the coastline because of the presence of fisheries, shipping, tourism, and they are affecting the deep sea coral, which characterize this area quite uniquely, and also the species of megafauna which are quite common in the area. But that's an example, and very very interesting is that if you subscribe to the platform, you can use this tool freely. UNEP is working very much on spreading MSP in the Mediterranean, not only through the common framework I briefly mentioned before. They are also operationalizing some tools. This is a tool which is available under the ICZM platform, the platform for coastal zone management. There is a section specific on MSP. What's interesting here, they developed a sort of guidelines, online guidelines for planners to go through the different planning steps, and 4 tools to do some specific things. Check whether your MSP planning process is progressing coherently to the steps suggested, whether and now you have been implementing the ecosystem approach in MSP, how you have taken into consideration climate action MSP, and how you have taken in consideration lens interaction. These are 4 self-assessment tools which are available by any planner who want to understand how and is progressing in the MSP plan development. And last but not least, there is a community of practice. I had mentioned this before. Ahmed is actually one of the members of the core team of this community of practice. And we are a group of people who share a common concern. In this case, the concern is marine spatial planning of the Mediterranean and related problems, and come together to do different things, basically share experiences, find and define commonalities between these experiences, and try to reach to a common understanding on some of the challenges and common suggestions and recommendations to overcome these challenges at the transboundary level. Now the community of practice includes more than 130 people. It's very important to stress that people are participating in the community freely and not representing any countries, but they are, contributing individually. Therefore, it's very much a bottom-up approach to MSP at the Mediterranean level, which is very, in my view, important because I have quite a great dynamic and flexibility of the COP. We are not structured into a formal representativeness structure, which will make maybe things a little bit more effective, but definitely less dynamic and more static. Nevertheless, we want to reach a good cover of all the different components of the Mediterranean. So that's why we try to understand whether we do have people representing all the countries. You can see there are several represented. We are missing a few, and a few are underrepresented. And that's part of the work we are constantly doing in increasing the number of members and people from countries which are less represented at the moment. I'll jump this as time is running. We work through working groups. There are 4 working groups activated at the moment. One on MSP supporting sustainable aquaculture, another one on MSP supporting sustainable management of fisheries, a third one on MSP and offshore renewables, and a 4th one on MSP for the strengthen and extension of marine conservation. And we work through workshops. And as Ayman said, we are meeting next week in Tunis to have our last 2025 workshop, where we will focus on challenges. We work quite consistently on key items in the previous workshop. Now we'll focus on challenges, and next year we shall try to find some solutions to approach these challenges. Okay, we are almost ending my presentation. I would like to reflect a bit on why we need climate smart MSP and why what's climate smart MSP. We need climate smart MSP because climate change is affecting everywhere, including at sea, including the way we do plan and manage the sea. which means that the maritime spatial planning shall take into consideration adaptation and mitigation efforts from the very beginning of the process. In this consideration, we have to underline that ecosystem-based MSP is the cornerstone of any climate smart MSP. So, which means that the activities at sea, human activity at sea, has to be managed in a way that they do enable to preserve ecosystem health functions and resilience for the futures, including those functions which are strictly relevant for climate change adaptation and climate change mitigation. If we look at the MSP plans, what we should include in terms of adaptation and mitigation, or what ideally plans should take into consideration when they do try to be climate smart. I mean, there are elements which are common to adaptation and mitigation: the application of the ecosystem approach and adaptive approach, which evolve over time in consideration of changing in the boundary conditions. Of course, analyzing climate change projection scenarios, the effect they have on the different components of the system, including both the sectors and the environmental targets, and also improve the MSP governance, extending this governance beyond the typical actors which are involved in maritime spatial planning, by having actors also from climate change policy and land sea interactions policies. If we look at adaptation, this means that assessing impacts of climate change, implication for the sectors, implication for the species, and the way those are affecting the interactions among the different uses, and the typology of actions and measures that climate or adaptation measures that MSP plans can put forward in the plan. Typically, zoning for the future and working with scenarios is one of the way MSP can include climate change adaptation. We need to understand how the system will evolve in a climate change world and how the sectors could react in terms of areas needed for the activity. Easy to say, very difficult to do. But there is a lot of space also for mitigation in the MSP plans, not only in terms of allocating space for offshore renewable energy production, which of course means producing carbon-free energy, but even to support specific measures that can enable clean energy transition of some of the sectors. For example, the Italian plans has a lot of measures which push for the energy transition of fisheries and maritime transport. And last but not least, preserving and restoring blue carbon habitats. There are a number of habitats at sea that can store and can absorb CO2 and therefore act as mitigating measures for climate change. That's the theory. Reality is that if we look at both climate change adaptation and mitigation, we see that those are not fully taken into consideration for the moment by the plans. I mean, climate change adaptation is considered only for some specific climate change related risk, typically coastal erosion and flooding, or for specific sectors, specific elements, but it's not taken into account in a more integrated, explicit way. This is even because we must say that in most of the cases, in most of the countries, we are at the first stage of the first cycle of the MSP process, and probably taking into climate change into consideration is adding a level of challenge and difficulty to an exercise, the one of MSP, which is already challenging and difficult itself. So you see here the result of the analysis we did in a few countries around the EU, including Bulgaria, Italy, Spain, France, Germany, Latvia, and Finland, and that situation is quite common to all the countries, considering both more and less advanced ones. The situation with mitigation is a little bit more improved. I mean, all the plans we have been analyzing do consider mitigation provisions, but they are basically dealing with offshore renewables. I mean, in most of the cases, mitigation is very much related to the production of energy from renewable source of energy. There are some countries which include provisions beyond marine and renewable energy. For example, as I mentioned before, the Italian plan do include measures for the decarbonization of some of the sectors. And there is a very little consideration of blue carbon habitats preservation and protection. That's definitely one of the issue to work on in the future evolution of the MSP plan. And a way to try to make the plans more climate proof, more climate smart is definitely using scenarios. I'm reflecting here on an experience we are now concluding, and that's a project in Italy called MSP for Biodiversity. It follows under the umbrella of the National Biodiversity Future Center, which has been funded through the Next Generation EU funds in 2021 in Italy. And in this project, we are investigating the way of co-developing scenarios for the sustainable management of the sea in Italy in three areas: the Northern Adriatic, the Northern Tyrrhenian Sea, and the Strait of Sicily. And we are co-constructing scenarios to improve biodiversity conservation through maritime spatial planning. There are three scenarios we are developing in each of these three areas. We are developing means we have been involved. We involved a range of stakeholders to co-develop these scenarios in workshops we organize in each of the pilot areas. And the three scenarios briefly are the business as usual one. We call it slow pace, which is implementing some biodiversity conservation measures, but in a very, very slow way. One which is focusing on nature protection, very much pushing for the improved protection through MSP of biodiversity. Another one on blue development, which combine biodiversity protection with the sustainable development of the blue economy. I think this is my last slide. That's how, in a very big nutshell, the one scenario looks like. That's the nature at work or scenario for the Northern Adriatic Sea, and you can see the different zoning elements represented in the same slide. They do include, for example, the delimitation of new MPA areas, of new Natura 2000 sites areas, the identification of major routes for shipping traffic, the identification of areas for offshore renewable energy production, and the identification of a large purple area for the establishment of a PSSA, a particularly sea-sensitive area where speed of shipping vessels is reduced to 10 knots to reduce impacts for the megafauna present in the area. So there are a number of graphical and especially visual elements represented in maps and regulation to use this area in a proper way. What's interesting, what we are doing now here, where we have finalized this work, we are using this scenario to feed models to understand what happens to different components of the system. What happens in terms of cumulative effect assessment, what happens for specific impacts, for example, in terms of underwater noise, what happens for fisheries, is fishery increasing, decreasing, is changing in which way, and what happens for the socioeconomic indicators, what happens for the environmental services in the area. And all these results, which will be, of course, summarized in a report, are meant to feed the Italian formal statutory MSP process, which is now progressing in the implementation. I really thank you for your attention, and of course, I'm available for any question.
Thank you very much, Emiliano. This was super interesting and internal insight of how this is done and what different meanings does it have for actors like you. So thanks a lot, and I'm sure there are many questions. I have a couple, but I wouldn't like to be the first. Okay, I can be the first. People are still thinking. So since you've been involved in the development of the Italian MSP, the question would be, what sorts of conflicts have you found within the different disciplines within the same country? For instance, are there people in fisheries which have different interests than those in conservation biology? And if so, how do you deal with that? Another way of posing the same, what disciplines are involved in producing this a national MSP? Because you want to make it multi-scalar, but I suppose that that's easier said than done. Yeah, so you need to bring different groups to the table with different economic interests, but also with different sorts of expertise and academic interests, let's say. How does it work?
I'll start from the latter aspect of the question, and I'll say a few words more about the governance of the system in Italy, which I didn't mention. I mean, the competent authority is the Ministry of Infrastructure and Transportation in Italy, the competent authority for MSP, but they set a technical committee for MSP, which involves other ministries, and very important, they do involve the regions. So all the Italian coastal regions have had a very important role in co-developing the MSP plans for the area facing the region. And then we, as a researcher, have been involved as we call the scientific team supporting the MSP process, which is made by researchers from different institutions, not only CNR, which have been interacting with these authorities, the ministries and the regions, to co-develop the plans, which brought to the table a lot of different expertise. I mean, this a large team of researchers and officials from the administrations was very much covering many different aspects. You can imagine that you need planning experts. For example, in the team we have the University of Architecture and Urban Planning, which is one of the first in Italy who delivered MSP courses. But you also need a lot of sectoral experts in fisheries, in aquaculture, in shipping, and in any of in biodiversity conservation. And that's why, I mean, the team was very much large. Last but not least, I mean, legal experts are very essential, because when you do write a plan, I mean, everything becomes compulsory. Even if the Italian plan is strategic, as very much providing principle and strategic objectives for the future evolution of the sea, is a compulsory binding plan. So the legal experts are very much needed. Then comes the first part of the question. The other side of the planning approach are the stakeholders. I mean, you cannot plan without having stakeholders, quite obvious. I wouldn't say Italy is one of the base cases or a good case in terms of stakeholder participation. In Italy, the stakeholder participation has been quite marginalized to the official ones. I mean, the plan was published online, and people could have the possibility to provide their comments to the plans that we have been taken, of course, into consideration, but there was not proactive stakeholder participation, unless in some of the Italian regions, because of the regions that did institutionalize tables for the engagement of the different stakeholders. And there, where it comes to the conflicts, I mean, obviously the major conflicts are the typical ones. I mean, if you look at the major issue which is expected to provide conflicts, is definitely the one of offshore renewable energy development. Although the Italian plans say very few about this topic, but this is going to be probably included in the second round of the MSP plan development. And that's creating a lot of conflicts, a lot of expected conflicts, not only with fisheries. The other sector which is very much looking at this in a conflicting way is tourism. I mean, if you look at it, if you consider tourism operator and the regions which do rely on tourism consistently, they perceive the offshore renewable development as a very much conflicting sector for their activities.
Wonderful, thank you. Can I ask one more question while people think of their own? in the challenges to the Mediterranean Sea that pertain to marine spatial planning, you mentioned many of them, so that it looks overwhelming. And yet, you didn't mention some which are obvious to anyone that reads the news about the Mediterranean Sea, but maybe they do not pertain to spatial planning. I'm thinking particularly of two. One is in migration, so everything that has to do with legal and illegal movement of people, particularly from Africa to Europe, but obviously not only, also from Syria some years ago, and then how Frontex and the huge infrastructure that has devoted to that from the point of Europe, also the NGOs involved in the different activities. So I don't know. I suppose that does not pertain to marine spatial planning, but it's one of the challenges of the Mediterranean Sea. So I'm wondering, how do you deal with that? And then the other one is violence, and more specifically war. Yeah, we live in a Mediterranean Sea which is now haunted by at least two wars. But in the recent past, there were also the Arab Spring conflicts, and of course Libya, and then Syria, and now we have the Russia Ukraine, which has to do with the Black Sea, but we also have, of course, Israel and Lebanon and so on. So I don't know if that's something that you have to deal with, or because it's so general, disagreements that you need to reach, you try to leave those things aside. I have no idea how it works.
No, that's a very good question. I mean, it's difficult to say whether this is part or not of MSP, because that's very much country-based. If we took the first issue, migration, we had a very big debate whether to include it or not in the Italian plans, and actually we did. There are some of the areas in the south of Italy which have been prioritized in their use for security reasons, which refer both to navigation security, but also operation to enable safety for human life, a particular attention of this operation due to the concentration of migrating routes. I must say, the only plan I have seen which has this which has operationalized this in a zoning way. There are other plans looking at safety conditions and navigation, but looking at the migration implication, I only seen something in the Italian plan. In my view, it is very much an issue of MSP plans, because I mean you have to ensure, or you have at least map a space where the concentration of activity for human life safety operations is higher because of migration, where control is higher, and that's typically something that an MSP plan has to take into consideration. The question on war and the implication of conflicts is definitely more difficult. I can see a lot of implication when we look at the collaboration at the Mediterranean level. I cannot hide, for example, that within the MSP scope there is quite a number of people having been discussing whether it was not correct or to include Israel in the community of practice, just to give you an example. But there may be other components which are very much affecting the way collaboration can operate or not. When we come to the national level, this is becoming quite evident. I've seen Italian documents for the first time, which I never seen before when we were designing the plan, which start allocating space, more space for Navy operation, for some uses of the sea which were unforeseen for the moment, like, for example, underwater drones operation, which is something I've never seen before. And now there are official Italian documents, which plan area for the operation of patrol activities on underwater drones. Again, that's something that the national level makes very much sense to take into consideration in the MSP plan. I don't know, probably that's not a good shift of the MSP approach, but it's something we need to take into account anyhow.
Thank you. I think Pablo has a question, and then
Yes, thank you, Emiliano, for your talk. I think you pictured a very complex institutional setting for maritime spatial planning in the Mediterranean, probably like rightfully so. But my question relates precisely to the role the Mediterranean Action Plan has played in it. It is quite surprising for me that just in 2008, the Mediterranean Action Plan seems to be like the first actor accountable for international accountable for maritime spatial planning in the Mediterranean, whereas maritime spatial planning in its own is, a branch of maritime history with centuries of history, and then the Mediterranean Action Plan had already been ongoing for more than 30 years. So why 2008 has to be like this point? This bridging point in the history of Mediterranean management. Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe
2008 is the turning point because it is the year when the protocol on integrated coastal zone management was ratified by a sufficient number of countries to make the protocol into place. No, sorry, I'm saying wrongly. 2008 was when the protocol was approved and successfully ratified by the needed number of countries to enter into implementation. So that's the turning point that made the ICZM a binding instrument for the Mediterranean. What's ICZM according to the protocol is the integrated management of the coastal area, which includes, of course, the land component of the coast, but also the water till the demarcation of territorial seas. So although the ICZM protocol does not mention marine spatial planning, it extends to planning and management of the sea and indirectly to marine spatial planning. Nevertheless, it does not provide, or it did not provide till a few years ago, a binding document, a binding legal document requiring all countries to advance in marine spatial planning. That's why the protocol has entered into MSP activity only recently, and that's happened when the common framework for MSP was approved in 2019 by the contracting parties of the Barcelona Convention, and its protocols. Then, when you look at the Mediterranean countries, difference between the countries are very, very big in terms of capacity, empowerment, governance systems, socioeconomic conditions, socioeconomic characteristics. This diversity is a richness, but is also quite a constraints for the UNEMAP activities to advance consistently. So they do advance in a steady pace, but very, very slowly compared to what the European Union is, for example, doing. Nevertheless, if you look at the EU MSP directive, the least comers with the MSP plan are all Mediterranean countries and the Black Sea ones, the two Black Sea countries. So there is also this tendency of implementing the international and European policy later than others that to be taken on board, even for the EU countries, for the European countries, not only for the non-EU ones.
Okay, thank you, Emiliano.
You're welcome.
Keep asking questions, but for the moment, it's fine.
You are invited to come here, so we can talk in presence whenever you want.
Yeah, and there will be probably time for one more question by Pablo, but first, Jeep, please.
Yeah, thanks very much. I learned a lot of things. I had very little idea about this works in practice, and it's actually very interesting. One of the things that you seem to say quite clearly is that most of the plans and most of the things that are implemented now are on the national level, whereas some of the problems and the challenges you presented are clearly on the transboundary level. Like migration is a clear one, environmental protection is a clear one, I think, where it would make sense to move those plans to international levels. And I'm wondering to what extent this has to do with the legal frameworks that are there. You're explaining that a lot of the legal frameworks and international cooperation is very recent, but it seems that we still push for national plans. And to what extent do you think that that kind of like national level, national scale of plans is in the way of dealing, for example, with migration? Second question that I have is much more specific. You mentioned that there is a conflict between tourism and renewables in the Italian plan. And I was wondering whether you could explain what exactly that conflict is, because I can't quite imagine how
Sure.
producing renewable energy is in the way of tourism.
Sure. Okay, the first question is very difficult. The MSP is an affair of national countries. I mean, of the national level. That's quite clear in the directive because of the subsidiarity principle. It is something really MSP is really affecting the evolution of a country socioeconomics, and has to be taken by the national level. There's no way it comes from a different upper level. Nevertheless, a lot of efforts can be done and actually have been done to make things more coherent towards common approaches. We have learned about, we have talked about the role of regional cooperation initiatives like UNEP-MAP. There are others in all the sea basins, which are essential, very much essential. The European Union is really putting a lot of money on cooperation through projects, through initiatives like the MSP Community of Practice, although the MSP COP is not funded. And in the new Ocean Pact, which will follow the Ocean Act, that will going to be issued, and that is going also to reshape the MSP directive. Is going to redevelop update the MSP directive. There will be a greater effort on regional sea cooperation and collaboration towards common goals or common objectives and coherent MSP planning. I think that's the level that can be reached from the international or European government, but the core of the MSP process will remain in the country. So the room here for the European Union and for international organization is to make the most that is possible to enable countries planning coherently toward common objectives. Coming to the conflicts between tourism and sea and offshore renewable energy development, that's basically due to major impacts. The major one is on the landscape and the seascape. So there is this perception that you want to. The Mediterranean is why people come to the Mediterranean, because of the pristine environment, the nice sea, the transparent water, the beautiful biodiversity, and anything which is changing also only minimally, this expectation is perceived as an impact. We can question whether this is real or not, whether looking at turbines offshore 20 nautical miles is really impacting the landscape or not, but that's the perception and the fear of most of the regional administration, which do rely on tourism activity in terms of economics. I give you a couple of examples. Sardinia is very much looking at this with a lot of attention. The other conflicts is probably less extended in terms of spatial dimension, but more real. Any kind of offshore renewable energy development at sea needs connection to the land, and that's happened with cables. That's happened with transformation units on the land, which they do occupy coastal areas. Some of them might be of high value for again coastal tourism, like beaches and coastal areas. It's always a matter of what are your targets of production and what's the role of proper planning of activity both at sea and on land to avoid, for example, conflict with high value available marine and coastal areas. And most and on top of this, of the proper stakeholder engagement. I mean, if you have a proper stakeholder engagement and you make co-develop decisions with stakeholders, probably you can get rid of most of these conflicts in a real way.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Ayman has a question.
Yeah. Thank you, Emiliano, for the presentation. I have a few questions. You mentioned that MSP was developed very well in the European Union countries from the Mediterranean side. However, I see that the South still not have any initiatives until now. So we are working with during the last few years with the MSP and with the projects that coordinating with South countries. My question is, I mean, your opinion, and from your experience, what are the main challenges for the South to have similar plan to the European Union countries? In the same context, I see that even in the European Union level, I see, for example, Greek is still late and doesn't have plan, as you mentioned, until now. No. What make plans within the European Union challenging and take so long time? Like, for example, Italy doesn't finish at 2021 and take 2 more years, I think. So what the main challenges is technical, legal, economic, political, I don't know, from your experience. Within the same context of the challenging, how MSP deals with conflicting borders. We know that in the Mediterranean Sea, there is a lot of conflicts between economical zones and other names of the space. So in case there are some conflicts and that are not clear, how the planes deal with that context. And my last question is about the objective MSP is balancing between blue economy development and protection. From your experience, do you see that this balance, or the plans now they are going to the side of development of economic or more marine protection plans? Thank you.
Thank you to you, Ayman. All very good questions, and I can reflect on some elements coming from the operational activities we did for the Italian MSP plan. I think the challenges we encountered in Italy are not very much different to the challenges that Southern Mediterranean countries will or are already encountering. It's only a matter of timing. The first big challenge is that MSP is complex. I mean, you're not dealing with a single sector. We are dealing with multiple layers, all the possible sectors, different level of governance, stakeholders, different disciplines, different capacity which are needed, from the legal to economic to environmental one. So that's a complex exercise. Then if you add climate smart MSP, is even more complex. And that's where things are getting very, very much challenging. So that's one of the major constraints we have to deal with. Maybe the even more important is that you might end to the conclusion that you don't need an MSP plan. I mean, you need an MSP plan if you really want to approach the problem in an integrated way and to try to find solutions to different needs, to different requests. Let's say if in case you have a single activity at sea which is overriding all the others, and you don't care about the others, you may even come to the conclusion that MSP is not needed. You just need I don't know, the plan for the fishery sector, which is the one driving all your attention. So there must be a real political will to implement MSP, and that's, for example, why they took a long time in Italy to emerge as quite evident will to go ahead with the process. Probably was the major constraint. At the same time, you must even have big drivers. The political will has to match with expectation at sea. I mean, that in the northern countries, one of the major driving has been exactly offshore wind development to drive MSP. This is not the case of the Mediterranean, where probably, in my view, the major driver is, or at least should be, the equal management of different activity at the sea, which in many cases they do have a very small size component implication. If we consider fisheries and aquaculture, for example, they're totally different from the Northern European ones in the Mediterranean. They are run by a small scale firm made by few people. The same happens for several activities at sea. Tourism is another one. So, which means that you have to look at many different things together, and that's probably where the added value of MSP comes to place in the Mediterranean. Not to forget about any of the sector, not to forget about any of the representative of different stakeholder groups and communities, which also links to the fact that, in my view, there cannot be an MSP plan which do not consider blue economy development and natural protection at the same level. There are two coins of the same medal, two faces of the same medal. An MSP plan that do only consider blue economy is not an MSP plan. It's a blue economy plan. I mean, in Italy we have the blue economy strategy. It's the task of the MSP plan is to take this blue economy strategy, deliver into an MSP plan, into zoning, but which is coherent with other needs and expectations, the one of the local communities, the social ones, and the ones of environmental protection. In this sense, MSP is not the process which lead to delimitate and establish new marine protected area. That's another process. That's the case for most of the countries. Again, the role of MSP is to put together different processes, including the MPA, the one identifying new MPA, extending or identifying new MPA, which have to be taken on board in an integrated plan to put all the things coherently together. And to come to borders, that Italy, I think, is the Mediterranean countries sharing most of the borders with most of the countries in the Med, and obviously some of them are conflicting in terms of border delimitation. We have issues with Algeria. We have issue with Malta. I think basically we have issues with these two countries. We even actually, in the case of Italy, has declared the economic exclusivity zone, but this has not entered into force yet because of the negotiation undergoing. So what we did in the Italian plan is to plan till the midline delimitation, considering the official delimitation where this has been agreed, like in the case of the Adriatic, the midline delimitation has been agreed several years ago. And where this is still under negotiation, we asked to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs which kind of delimitation we should have used for the plans. But at the same time, in all the plans, we included a caveat which states that the MSP plan the geographic scope considered by the MSP plan and any representation in the MSP plans do not prevent and do not affect any ongoing negotiation with other countries. This means that even if we plan to the border, which is still this dispute with Malta, for example, and we include maps showing our activity to the delimitation with the Malta border, which has not been agreed upon this map does not affect any negotiation process going with Malta. I mean, Malta can still operate to come to a negotiation which is according to their opinion, fine for them. That's very important because give you a little bit of more freedom to extend your planning also beyond the officially defined borders. Otherwise, we would have been able to plan only to including the territorial waters and the protection economic zone, ecological zone in the Mediterranean Sea, excluding a large part of the of the water which falls into the continental shelves of Italy. But that's why the ministry. That's why the Ministry the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs is part of the technical committee for MSP, specifically to take into consideration these issues.
Yeah, I understood your point, but in the plan, there has a boundary.
There's boundaries.
In the maps, boundaries. Yeah. So that's why my question, that boundary is how to deal if you don't.
Well, okay. I mean, graphically, it is said that this is a boundary under negotiation. And then in each map, we state that this representation does not affect any process of negotiation which is ongoing with the neighboring countries. It's just to represent some elements of the plans, but is not writing to the stone. Those are the Italian borders. Obviously, this is not sufficient because, for example, when we opened the transboundary consultation, Malta reacted saying that those are not the official borders which belong to the Italian waters. Okay, but we know this. I mean, that's part of the game.
I have a related question, which is it has to do with what parts of the column of water are you most interested in, or in other words, to which depths do maritime spatial plannings, especially the mapping and the zoning, go? So because the zoning, you're talking mostly about miles from the shore, but I'm also wondering, do you specify meters from the surface, or is it mostly the EEZ, the exclusive economic zones, do specify whether you're talking about the seabed or the volume of water or the surface. I don't know if there is the same kind of zoning in maritime spatial planning. For instance, when you're talking about drawing and trawling and fishing, yeah, sure. I suppose you're talking about the seabed, but yeah.
I mean, the very common slogan when you talk about MSP is that MSP is 4-dimensional process, taking into consideration the 3 spatial dimensions and the temporal dimension. In the Italian case, this is included, but it's not so evident in structure. I mean, we haven't produced maps for different depths. For example, there is the sea is represented by one map identifying the planning unit, and everything which is related to the planning unit is represented in a single map. In any case, you might have in a single planning unit priorities which take in consideration different depth. And actually, the different priority can even coexist because they do refer to sectors which do affect different depth. That's the case I gave for Friuli Venezia Giulia where we have this area which is both prioritized for maritime transportation and biodiversity conservation, which could seem quite strange. It can happen because, I mean, the biodiversity conservation is mainly focusing on sea bottom habitats at a depth of 25-30 meters. So a use which is very much focusing on the sea bottom, while the other priority on navigation is mainly, I mean, is actually for the surface. This does not mean that navigation do not provide any kind of impacts to this kind of sea bottom habitats which are present in that planning unit, because, for example, in terms of noise, in terms of pollution, there might be some impacts, but in any case, those activities can coexist under specific regulations. But a proper, I mean, if you look at proper zoning, I mean, let's represent different levels of zoning in terms of depth. That's something, honestly, I've never seen in any MSP plan.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Okay, so I think we've reached the time. If there are no pressing questions,
one last question.
Absolutely.
Go for it. Related to the death that Lino was talking about or asking about, I'm studying the bathymetry studies in the Mediterranean Sea, and I know that data missing or lack of data is one of the challenges for marine spatial planning, but even there is no data, there is plan. So just from your experience, or you are from scientific background, what kind of data that still miss in the Mediterranean Sea, even it's 100% of the water surface? It's small, but there is a problem with access of data or the lack of data.
Good. Another good question. Planners always say the data is never enough. But if I should pay, now I say, okay, pay for some data which is missing. Where would you pay? Where do you put your money on? I would like to have more data on habitats, sea bottom habitats and pelagic habitats. I mean, when we started the plan, we had very, very limited data on this. And I must say that the funds which were made available through the Next Generation EU program has been quite used by the Italian Ministry of the Environment to improve this gap. And now they are finalizing a project which has been used to map most of the sea bottom habitats in the Italian waters, including in particularly high details mapping of seamounts in the Central and Southern Mediterranean Sea, which are very, very important because those are the area of high ecological values, which, for example, could be used to define new marine protected areas offshore to match the target of 30% protection area. At the same time, they are well known by fishermen because they are used by fishermen to fish. So those are the proper knowledge of where those habitats are is essential to improve also MSP planning. We did an exercise with the scenario building. I quickly showed at the end of my presentation where we do enter in the detailed analysis of local data on seabed habitats, which was very interesting to understand that it's actually possible to allocate space for activities in a way that do not interfere consistently or less interfere with the habitats and the biodiversity species hosted by habitats, but you must know where they are. I mean, if you know that, you can avoid them. Otherwise, it's practically impossible. So that's, for example, where I would like to know more and to have data specifically on this aspect for improved planning. Another case which is very well documented of data gap is about small scale fisheries. There is quite a great debate of gradually transforming industrial fishery into small scale or small scale sustainable fisheries, but we know very little about this. They are doing different activities to improve mapping of small scale fisheries. And even larger is the gap about recreational fisheries. There are studies in the Med arguing that recreational fisheries account for 1/4 of the total catch in the Med, which is a huge number of, which is huge volume of quotes, considering that they are completely out of the official market. But we don't know exactly where those recreational fisheries activity are going on in more specific way. That's another typical gap to deal with.
Super interesting. Good. I think this was enough for you, Emiliano, to respond to. And we wanted to thank you for your wonderful talk and thank Aynen for the idea and for the invitation. I think this was a very good addition to the seminar. So thanks a lot, and we'll see us next month with Lucia Carminati. All right,
Great.
Emiliano.
Thanks to you, and write me for any needed contact and interactions. And see you, Ayman, soon in Tunis.
See you next week. Thank you.
And Pablo,
Wonderful.
see you in CNR.
Hopefully,
Video
yeah.
December. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cool. Well done, Ayman. Yeah, nice talk and nice questions. Except Ada didn't ask a question. That's a
I don't
pity.
know why.
We can hear you. You're happily muted. It's all right.
Yeah, it's
okay.
actually probably better. I was having a heightened reaction. I thought we would go over time, and we did. So
Okay, Pablo, Ada.
goodbye. Oh, did I freeze? Raya!
Hopefully we can meet by the DEEPMED dinner in Christmas. Who knows?
Every time we see Pablo, he looks worse and worse. You need to come back to Spain. What's happening with you? Are you right,
What's going
Pablo?
on?
Are you okay?
You think we?
No, I was just saying that hopefully we can meet by the time of the DEEPMED, the date of the DEEPMED dinner, which I don't know when it's going to be, but hopefully.
But you come
Otherwise,
back.
It's true.
see
We
you.
talked about that in the room. Yeah. Let's do something. You're right.
Good. It's always good to do things.
Yes.
You come back to
Have
Sevilla
you
on
had?
the 15th? I thought you were going to Madrid.
I mean, yes, but if there's a dinner, maybe I can go to Sevilla. I don't know.
Wow.
I would. I mean, that's a reason to go back just a couple of days. We'll see.
Okay.
Okay. We have a seminar in late December, don't we? Oh, but that's before that or what? Okay.
I don't know what you were talking about.
Did they did they just disconnect?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what they were talking about, but they don't even care. I just brought about this thing in the end, and they were like, "Yeah, yeah, fine, we're gonna have lunch."
I think he says that there's a seminar in
Ah,
December.
okay. Sorry, I have to leave because I'm gonna have a haircut.
Yeah, I want to leave anyways. This has been
Okay,
for
fine.
so long. Bye, my love. See
Are you in
you.
Turin?
Yeah,
You're in
but I'll
Turin.
be back next week. I'm in Seville.
All right.
Bye, love.
Ciao.